The morning of the accident began with the rich, earthy scent of freshly ground coffee and a lie so beautifully constructed it felt like a kindness. I remember the specific coolness of the white quartz island against my palms as I stood in our sun-drenched kitchen, a space I had designed myself to be our sanctuary. I watched my husband, Adam Cole, as he meticulously prepared my morning cup. He was the very picture of modern devotion, his dark hair perfectly coiffed, his smile so effortlessly charming it had once felt like my own personal discovery. He slid the heavy ceramic mug across the gleaming counter, his touch deliberately lingering on my hand, a small, possessive gesture I'd always mistaken for affection. "Big day, Sophia," he said, his voice a low, resonant hum that always managed to soothe my anxieties. "The board is going to be blown away by the new Laurel Group proposal. You're going to walk in there and own that room." I offered a smile that was genuine, buoyed by his confidence. My company, the Laurel Group, was more than a business. It was the living, breathing legacy of my father. He'd given me the seed money, yes, but more importantly, he'd given me the belief that I could build something beautiful and lasting. Since his passing 2 years ago, the company had become my connection to him, a way to honor his faith in me. Adam had, from the very beginning, positioned himself as my staunchest ally. "I hope so," I replied, my own voice a little tight, betraying the nerves churning in my stomach. "This Regent Towers contract, it changes everything. It's not just a project, it's a statement. It puts us on the international map." He rounded the island, his movements fluid and confident, and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. He rested his chin on my shoulder, his familiar weight a comforting presence. "Not if, Sophia, when," he corrected me, his breath warm against my ear. "It's a done deal. You're a genius, and they know it. I'm just your handsome arm candy." His easy humor worked its magic, and I felt the knot in my stomach loosen. As I gathered my leather portfolio and briefcase, a project I'd poured my soul into for 6 months, he plucked my car keys from the silver hook by the door. "Hey, do me a favor and take the Lakefront Expressway today," he suggested, his tone so light and casual it was almost an afterthought. The I-5 is an absolute disaster. There was a huge pileup near the bridge, and they've got it down to 1 lane. It'll be a parking lot for hours. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. The Lakefront Expressway was scenic, a winding ribbon of road tracing the edge of the water, but it was notoriously slower, full of sharp turns and blind corners. The I-5, for all its traffic, was the direct artery to downtown. "Are you sure? I feel like the I-5 is always faster, even with a jam." He gave me a look I knew well, a playfully theatrical pout of exasperation that had always disarmed me. "Sophia, my love, do you trust me?" he asked, dangling the keys with a little jingle. "I was just looking at the traffic maps while the coffee brewed. I want you to get there on time, but I also want you to arrive calm and focused, not stressed from sitting in traffic. It's for us, for our future. For us." It was the mantra of our marriage, the beautiful silken thread that tied all our ambitions together. Everything he did, everything I did, was for the shared dream we were building. I had believed in that promise with every fiber of my being. "Okay, you convinced me," I laughed, finally relenting and taking the keys from his outstretched hand. I leaned in and gave him a quick, loving kiss, the familiar taste of his coffee, and the faint, clean scent of his cologne a comforting start to a crucial day. "I'll see you tonight. We'll celebrate." "I'll have the best champagne chilled and waiting," he promised, his blue eyes glinting in the bright morning light with an intensity that, in hindsight, was not love, but something far more predatory. As I walked to my car, a sudden, inexplicable shiver traced a path down my spine, a cold premonition that was gone as quickly as it came. I dismissed it as nothing more than pre-presentation jitters. He was just being thoughtful. He was just my loving husband, making sure my day went perfectly. That was the last clear, coherent thought I had before my world fractured into a terrifying symphony of screeching tires, the sickening lurch of metal giving way, and the explosive shattering of glass. My return to consciousness was not a gentle drift, but a violent yank from a black, silent abyss. The first thing that registered was a sound, a high-pitched, metronomic beeping that was utterly alien. It was a sterile mechanical pulse that belonged to a world of sickness and emergency, not my carefully curated life of soft textures, warm lighting, and muted colors. A groan tore from my throat, a raw, rusty sound that felt like it came from a stranger. A deep, throbbing ache had taken root behind my eyes, a relentless pressure that radiated down my neck and spread like a fire across my shoulders. I tried to lift a hand to my pounding head, but my arm was a leaden weight, pinned down by a tangle of thin, clear tubes taped to my skin. I forced my heavy eyelids open, my lashes sticking together. The world swam into view as a blurry, overexposed photograph. All white. White walls, white sheets. A white acoustic-tiled ceiling. The sharp, clinical scent of antiseptic stung my nostrils, a smell that screamed hospital. Panic, cold and sharp as a needle, began to prickle at the edges of my drug-addled mind. Where was I? What in God's name had happened? A shape slowly resolved itself from the white blur, a dark figure seated in a chair beside the bed. Sophia? Honey, can you hear me? It's Adam. His voice was thick with a syrupy, overwrought concern that felt wrong. It was a performance. It was too loud, too perfect, a caricature of a worried husband. I blinked again, trying to clear the fog, and his face sharpened into focus. His dark hair was perfectly in place, his expensive shirt crisp and impossibly unwrinkled. He looked less like a man who had been keeping a frantic, sleepless vigil, and more like a man who had just stepped out of a boardroom, waiting for the next item on his agenda. The sight of him, which should have been an anchor in this terrifying sea of confusion, instead sent a fresh wave of dread through me. The vague unease from the morning returned with a vengeance, now magnified and monstrous. Adam? My voice was a dry, cracking whisper. What happened to me? He leaned forward, enveloping my hand in both of his. His skin was cool and dry, not the familiar warmth I craved. His touch felt clinical, a duty being performed. Shh, don't try to talk too much. You were in an accident, baby. A terrible one, he murmured, his voice a stage whisper. Your car. The brakes just gave out on the Lakefront Expressway. You went right off the road. It's a miracle you're alive. The Lakefront Expressway. His words echoed in the hollow cavern of my mind, each one a hammer blow. Take the Lakefront Expressway today. My eyes searched his, desperately looking for a reflection of my own terror, for the raw, unvarnished fear of a man who had almost lost his wife. I found nothing. His blue eyes were clear, steady, and unnervingly calm. His expression a carefully constructed mask of manufactured sympathy. The brakes? Failed? I whispered, my mind a broken machine, struggling to connect the pieces through the thick fog of pain and powerful medication. Don't you worry about a single thing, he soothed, his thumb stroking the back of my hand in a repetitive mechanical gesture that felt rehearsed and utterly devoid of genuine comfort. I've been right here the entire time. I've handled everything. The doctors, the police reports, all the necessary paperwork. He said that last word, paperwork, with a strange, subtle emphasis, a micro-shift in his tone that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. The sterile room, once just a blank space, now felt like a cage. It was closing in on me, the relentless beeping of the heart monitor a sinister countdown to something I couldn't name but could feel in my bones. I was adrift, trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey me, with the horrifying intuition that the man holding my hand wasn't my savior, but the very architect of my ruin. My memory of the crash remained a complete and terrifying black hole. But my gut was screaming, a silent, frantic siren warning me that I was in more danger in this quiet white room than I had ever been in the twisted, smoking wreckage of my car. The next time consciousness found me, the afternoon sun was spilling through the large window, casting long, distorted shadows across the sterile white room. The world felt a little sharper, the fog in my head having receded slightly, though the pain remained a constant, unwelcome guest. Adam was still there, a sentry at my bedside. This time, a handsome, dark leather folio rested on his lap. He looked up the instant my eyes fluttered open, a bright, toothy smile immediately stretching across his face. It didn't reach his eyes. There she is, my beautiful fighter. How are you feeling, my love? He asked, his voice a notch too loud, too cheerful for the somber environment. Tired, I rasped, my throat still raw. My head. It hurts. The steady drip of the IV was a liquid metronome, marking the slow, agonizing passage of time and reminding me of my own vulnerability. "The doctor said the medication would make you groggy for a while," he said, shifting his chair so it scraped against the linoleum floor, the sound grating on my frayed nerves. He moved the folio from his lap to the rolling bedside table, opening it with a quiet, decisive click of its magnetic clasp. Inside, I could see a thick stack of papers, dense with impenetrable blocks of fine-print legal text. He produced a sleek silver pen from the inside pocket of his jacket. The sight of it sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. My heart, which had been beating in a slow, drug-induced rhythm, suddenly kicked into a frantic gallop. The monitor beside me immediately betrayed my fear, its steady beep accelerating into a panicked chirp. "Adam, what is that?" I asked, my voice thin. A new kind of fear, sharp and chillingly specific, began to cut through the haze of medication. "It's nothing, honey. Just some standard paperwork," he said smoothly, his eyes darting to the papers and then back to me, avoiding a direct gaze. "Some urgent medical forms the hospital needs. With everything going on, they need my signature to authorize your ongoing care, make decisions if you're, unable. It's just a formality to make everything easier for us." He uncapped the pen. The crisp click echoed in the quiet room like a gunshot. He slid the top document forward, carefully folding it back on itself, so that only the very bottom of the page, with a single stark signature line, was visible. "Don't try to talk. Just rest," he said, his voice dropping into a low, hypnotic murmur that I now recognized as his persuasion voice. He gently took my right hand, the one without the IV, and placed the pen between my fingers. His own hand closed over mine, his grip surprisingly firm, guiding my trembling fingers toward the page. "Just sign right here. It's for us. It's so I can take proper care of you. For us." The phrase that had once been my comfort, my promise of a shared life, now sounded like a death sentence. My mind was a maelstrom of silent screams. Medical forms didn't come in expensive leather folios. Doctors in white coats brought medical forms, not impeccably dressed husbands, and they explained them, painstakingly, with witnesses. They didn't hide the text and demand a blind signature from a patient barely lucid. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I felt so weak, so utterly powerless. My hand trembled under the relentless pressure of his. I could smell his cologne, a sophisticated sandalwood scent I had bought him for our anniversary, but now it seemed cloying, predatory, the scent of a hunter closing in on his prey. I looked from the pen to his face. The charming, concerned smile was completely gone, replaced by a tight, impatient line of his mouth. His eyes were no longer on me. They were hard, metallic things, fixed on the signature line with a terrifying, naked hunger. This wasn't concern. This was avarice. This was a cold, calculated coup, and I had been too besotted, too trusting to see the signs. My fingers were numb, my will to resist dissolving under the crushing weight of his insistence, the fog of the drugs, and the deep, throbbing pain in my skull. I was about to let my hand move, to form the familiar loops and lines of my name. To sign away? What? My company? My home? My life? I didn't know, and that ignorance was the most terrifying part of all. I was signing my own death warrant. I could feel it. The cold metal tip of the pen finally touched the paper. Just as the fine nib of the pen was about to release its dark ink onto the page, the door to my room swung open with a soft, pneumatic whoosh. The abruptness of it made Adam flinch, a sudden guilty movement. Framed in the doorway stood a tall, silver-haired man in a crisp white coat, his presence instantly radiating an aura of calm authority that commanded the entire room. His face, etched with the fine lines of a life spent in deep thought and compassionate service, was a sight that brought a sob of relief to my throat. Dr. Michael Stewart, my father's best friend, the man I had known my entire life as Uncle Michael. "Adam, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Dr. Stewart's voice was perfectly level, yet it carried a steel edge that sliced through the tense, cloying atmosphere Adam had created. Adam jumped to his feet, snatching his hand back from mine as if he'd touched a hot stove. A flash of pure, undiluted fury crossed his features, before he expertly smoothed it into a mask of polite, bewildered concern. "Dr. Stewart," he said, his voice strained, a little too high-pitched. I was helping Sophia sign some necessary consent forms. The nursing staff was busy, and they said it was urgent. I am the chief of staff of this entire hospital, Adam," Dr. Stewart interrupted, his voice dropping a decibel but gaining an unmistakable weight. His sharp, intelligent eyes were not on me, but fixed laser-like on the stack of papers on the bedside table. And I can personally assure you that no member of my staff would ever pressure a heavily medicated patient, a victim of a traumatic accident, into signing complex legal documents. Especially not these. He strode across the room, his long legs covering the distance in 3 determined steps. He moved like a man on a mission, a confrontation that felt as if it had been brewing for years. Adam, visibly flustered and cornered, made a move to close the leather folio, to hide the evidence. But Dr. Stewart, despite his age, was faster and far more resolute. He slammed a hand down on the leather cover, stopping him cold. "Let me see them," he commanded. It was not a request. "This is a private matter, Doctor. It's between my wife and me," Adam hissed, his voice a low, venomous whisper. The polite facade was cracking under the pressure. "This is a medical matter concerning my patient," Dr. Stewart countered, his gaze unwavering and hard as granite. "A patient who happens to be the daughter of my oldest and dearest friend, a man who entrusted her to my care." The air crackled. Then, in one swift, shockingly decisive movement, Dr. Stewart reached out and grabbed Adam's wrist, his grip surprisingly powerful. "What are you—" Adam began, a yelp of pain and surprise escaping his lips as Dr. Stewart's fingers tightened. "Let go of me." "Then let go of the papers," Dr. Stewart said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, felt as if it had stopped cold. The world seemed to slow down. I lay there, frozen, a silent, paralyzed spectator to a primal battle being waged over my life. The man I had vowed to love and cherish was being physically restrained by the man who embodied my father's unwavering protection. The charade was over. The loving, devoted husband had vanished, and in his place was a cornered, snarling animal, his eyes darting from Dr. Stewart's implacable face to the incriminating documents, desperately seeking an escape route where there was none. With a final, furious grunt, Adam wrenched his wrist free, abandoning the folio on the table. He took a step back, frantically smoothing the front of his shirt in a pathetic, reflexive attempt to regain some shred of his shattered dignity. "This is completely absurd," he spat, his face a mask of impotent rage. "I'm calling my lawyer." He turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that a small picture frame on the wall rattled. The silence he left in his wake was profound, broken only by the steady, now much slower beep of the heart monitor. My heart was beating again, and for the first time in days, it was beating for me. Dr. Stewart remained with his back to me for a long moment, his broad shoulders rising and falling with a single, deep, cleansing breath. It was as if he were releasing a tension he'd been carrying not just for the last few minutes, but for years. When he finally turned to face me, his expression was a heartbreaking collage of profound sadness, paternal anger, and gentle, unwavering reassurance. He walked slowly to my bedside and picked up the handsome leather folio that Adam had abandoned in his hasty retreat. He flipped it open, his gaze scanning the top page with a weary recognition. It was clear he already knew, or had deeply suspected, what he would find. "Oh, Sophia," he said, his voice thick with a sorrow that felt like it came from my own father. "I am so, so sorry. I'm sorry this is how you had to find out what he truly is." The dam of my composure, already cracked and fragile, finally broke. Tears I hadn't even realized I was holding back began to stream down my face, hot and silent against my cool skin. They were tears of raw terror, of overwhelming relief, but most of all, they were tears for the death of a love I had believed was the central pillar of my life. What were they?" I choked out, the words catching in my throat, barely audible. What did he want me to sign? He looked down at the top page, his lips pressing into a thin, grim line of utter contempt. "This first one," he said, his voice cold and precise, is a document granting durable power of attorney to one Adam Cole. It's ironclad. It would have given him complete and irrevocable legal control over all of your personal assets, your bank accounts, your property, everything. He carefully turned to the next page, his expression darkening further. And this one is even more insidious. It's a corporate resolution, already written for your signature as majority shareholder, appointing him as the acting CEO and chairman of the board of the Laurel Group, citing your prolonged and severe medical incapacitation. He wasn't just trying to manage your care, Sophia. He was orchestrating a complete hostile takeover of your company, of your entire life. The words landed not as a shock, but as a horrifying confirmation of the dread that had been coiling in my gut. The air rushed out of my lungs in a ragged gasp. This wasn't a moment of weakness on his part, a desperate act of a man under pressure. This was a plan, a meticulous, cold-blooded, and monstrously evil plan. The insistence on the Lakefront Expressway, the failed brakes, the rush to get my signature while I was drugged and disoriented. Every piece clicked sickeningly into place, revealing a portrait of a psychopath hiding behind the face of the man I loved. "The accident?" I whispered, the unspeakable thought finally forming into words. "Michael, do you think he tried to—" Dr. Stewart's compassionate eyes hardened into chips of ice. "The police are already impounding your car. I made a call the moment you were admitted and stable. I told them to bypass the usual insurance assessment and treat the vehicle as evidence in a potential crime. Your father, God rest his soul, he never trusted Adam. He told me once, over a scotch, that he saw a charming viper in him. He said Adam's ambition wasn't healthy. It was a hunger that would eventually consume everything around him. He made me promise, Sophia. He made me promise that if anything ever happened to you, I would look out for you. He was afraid of exactly this. My father, he had seen it all along. He had tried to protect me even from beyond the grave. The grief I felt for my dad, a wound that had become a dull ache, was suddenly sharp and fresh again, now mingled with an immense, overwhelming gratitude. Adam hadn't just betrayed me. He had defiled the memory of the man who had given me everything, the man whose belief was the bedrock of my success. The foundation of my world hadn't just cracked, it had been dynamited, revealing a bottomless pit of lies and manipulation. The love I had thought was my greatest strength had been nothing but a carefully honed weapon aimed directly at my heart. I closed my eyes, the spinning white room a manifestation of my crumbling reality. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the obliteration of the world as I knew it. After a compassionate nurse had checked my vitals, fluffed my pillows, and adjusted the flow of my pain medication, Dr. Stewart pulled his chair so close to my bed that our knees were almost touching. The room was quieter now, the harsh afternoon light softening into the warm, golden glow of the approaching sunset, which muted the sterile white walls and brought a semblance of peace. For the first time since waking up in this nightmare, I felt a flicker of genuine safety, of being under a formidable shield. "Your father was a brilliant man, Sophia, a titan in his field," Michael began, his voice a gentle, contemplative rumble. "But he was a far better father. He was fiercely protective. When you told him you were marrying Adam, he didn't protest, but he took action. He spent a month with his lawyers restructuring everything. Your inheritance, your controlling shares in the Laurel Group. He locked it all down within a series of intricate, layered trusts. He designed a fortress that would be almost impossible for an outsider to breach." He paused, a sad, knowing smile touching his lips. "He called Adam the fox trying to get into the hen house. He truly hoped he was wrong about him, for your sake. But he built the hen house out of steel just in case, and he made me the co-executor of his will and a silent, watching guardian on those trusts, with a set of specific instructions, emergency protocols he called them, to be triggered only under the most extreme circumstances." My mind, though still weary, was reeling with the implications. A secret guardian. A contingency plan designed years ago to foil the very events that were now unfolding. My father's foresight was a tangible thing, a shield reaching across time to protect me. So, he couldn't have actually taken the company? Even with my signature? I asked, a fragile sliver of hope piercing through the despair. Not without a long, ugly, and incredibly expensive fight, Michael corrected gently. But that was his plan. Your signature on that power of attorney would have been his legal battering ram. He would have had the standing to challenge the trusts, to tie up your assets in court for years, to bleed the company dry with legal fees until you were forced to capitulate. His plan was monstrous, but it was strategically sound. A cold, hard fire began to smolder deep in my chest, a fire that burned away the shock and the grief, leaving behind a core of pure, unadulterated anger. He was not going to get away with this. I would not allow the man who tried to murder me to dismantle my father's legacy, brick by brick. What do we do now, Michael? I asked, my voice transformed. The weak, trembling whisper was gone, replaced by a tone that was steady and sharp. Michael's expression shifted, his sorrow replaced by a look of grim determination. He saw the shift in me, the fighter emerging from the wreckage of the victim. Now, he said, leaning forward, his eyes glinting with a strategic light I had often seen in my father's. We let the fox think he's safely back in his den. Adam will assume his plan is foiled for now. He'll be furious, but he'll retreat, lay low, and wait for his next chance. He doesn't know that we're about to hand him that chance on a silver platter. I stared at him, my brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? He wants control of the Laurel Group, Michael explained, a cold smile touching his lips. So we are going to dangle it right in front of him. He tried to have you declared medically incapacitated. Let's use his own narrative against him. Tomorrow, as Chief of Staff, I will issue a formal medical opinion to your board of directors. I'll state that while your long-term prognosis is good, your recovery will be lengthy, and you are currently unable to fulfill your duties as CEO. I will recommend, for the stability of the company, that the board appoint an interim CEO at their earliest convenience. But they'll appoint him, I protested. He's my husband. He's been the supportive spouse in the background for years. He'll charm them. Exactly, Michael said, his smile turning predatory. We will let him walk right into that boardroom, convinced he's about to be crowned king. He'll have his speech prepared, his allies lined up. But you, Sophia, will be sitting at the head of that table, waiting for him. And this time, you won't be alone. An alliance was forged in that quiet, sun-drenched hospital room. A pact of vengeance and justice built on the foundations of a lifelong friendship and a brand-new, unquenchable fury. The victim was gone. In her place stood a queen, ready to defend her castle and expose the traitor in her court. 2 weeks later, I sat at the head of the immense polished mahogany table in the 43-floor boardroom of the Laurel Group, the sweeping panoramic view of the city skyline, a sight that normally filled my heart with a deep sense of pride and accomplishment, today felt like the dramatic backdrop for an execution. I was still in a wheelchair, a deliberate and powerful symbol of everything I had survived. My leg, encased in a heavy black cast, was propped up on a small stool beneath the table, and a constant, dull ache served as a physical reminder of the stakes. But my mind, honed by 2 weeks of quiet fury and meticulous planning, had never been sharper. Dr. Michael Stewart sat to my right, his calm, authoritative presence a silent bastion of support. To my left was Camille Rowe, a woman whose reputation preceded her. She was the sharpest, most feared corporate lawyer in the state, hired by Michael the day after the accident. Her expression was one of cool, detached intensity. The rest of the board members were arranged along the gleaming table, their faces a tense tableau of feigned sympathy and nervous curiosity. They knew I had been in a near-fatal accident. They knew this emergency meeting was to discuss the future leadership of the company. They had no idea they were about to be front-row witnesses to the public detonation of a marriage and the unmasking of a monster. The heavy oak doors swung open and Adam strode in. He was the picture of gravitas and control, dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase and offered a somber, gracious nod to the board members, a leader arriving to reluctantly take charge in a crisis. Then his eyes found me. For a split second, his confident stride faltered, his jaw going slack with shock. He had not, under any circumstances, expected me to be here. He recovered in a heartbeat, his actor's instincts kicking in. His expression instantly melted into one of deep, loving concern, a performance for the benefit of his audience. "Sophia, darling," he exclaimed, rushing to my side, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "What are you doing here? You should be at home, resting. This is too much for you." He reached out to place a comforting hand on my shoulder, but I leaned away from his touch as if from a hot flame, my gaze as cold and hard as the glass windows behind me. "I am exactly where I need to be, Adam," I said, my voice clear, strong, and devoid of any emotion. It carried effortlessly across the silent room. "Please, take a seat. We have a great deal to discuss." Visibly thrown by my icy demeanor, he retreated to the empty chair directly opposite me. Without missing a beat, he opened the meeting, launching into a smooth, brilliantly rehearsed speech about the need for continuity and stable leadership during this profoundly difficult time. He spoke of his boundless love for me, his unwavering commitment to my vision, and his reluctant but necessary readiness to step in as interim CEO to protect Sophia's legacy while she makes her recovery. It was a masterful, nauseating performance. I could see some of the board members nodding, their faces softening with sympathy. He had them. When he finished, he looked directly at me, a flicker of triumph in his eyes, clearly expecting my weak, tearful, grateful endorsement. I let the oppressive silence hang in the air for a long, torturous moment, forcing him to squirm. Then I spoke. "Thank you, Adam. That was very moving," I began, my voice dangerously soft. "You speak so eloquently of protecting my legacy. Let's talk about the specific ways you've been doing that." I gave a subtle nod to Camille. She opened a sleek laptop and, with a single keystroke, projected a high-resolution image onto the massive screen behind me. It was a scanned copy of the Durable Power of Attorney. "Could you please explain this document to the board, Adam?" I asked, my voice ringing with cold clarity. "The one you tried to force my signature on while I was heavily sedated in the ICU?" A collective audible gasp swept through the room. Adam's face, moments before, flush with confidence, went the color of ash. That's a complete misunderstanding. It was for medical decisions to help." "And this?" I cut him off, as Camille switched the slide to a multi-page forensic analysis from the State Police Forensics Lab. "This is the official report from the lead mechanic who inspected my vehicle. It concludes, and I quote, 'The primary brake line was deliberately and maliciously severed with a specialized cutting tool. The brakes on the car you were so insistent I drive, on the scenic route you so thoughtfully chose for me.'" The color drained completely from Adam's face. He began to stammer, his eyes darting frantically around the table, desperately searching for a friendly face, an ally. He found only masks of pure horror and dawning, sickened comprehension. "And finally," I said, my voice rising with righteous, controlled fury, "we have this." The slide changed again. "These are your phone records, subpoenaed by the police, showing 3 calls made to a mechanic with an extensive criminal record on the morning of my accident. The same mechanic who, when arrested 2 days ago, gave a full and detailed confession in exchange for a plea deal." At that precise moment, as if on cue, the boardroom doors opened again. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, their presence sucking the remaining air out of the room. Adam shot up from his chair, a cornered animal, his eyes wide with a terror that was, for the first time, utterly real. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. In that moment, I saw him for what he truly was, not a charming, sophisticated man, but a pathetic, greedy, and cowardly predator. "Sophia, please," he finally whispered, a desperate, pathetic plea. "Adam Cole," one of the officers said, his voice booming with authority in the acoustically perfect room. "You are under arrest for attempted murder." The aftermath was not a burst of triumphant celebration, but the quiet gray dawn that follows a long and violent hurricane. Watching the police officers read Adam his rights, handcuff him, and lead him away from my boardroom was not a moment of victory. It was a profoundly ugly and somber exorcism, the final, public amputation of a cancerous part of my life that I had mistaken for my heart. The ensuing scandal was a media firestorm, a sordid tale of greed and betrayal that played out on news sites and television screens. But I refused to hide. I faced it head-on, flanked by the unwavering support of Dr. Michael Stewart and the formidable, impenetrable shield of Camille Rowe's legal counsel. They ensured the truth. My truth dominated the narrative, not the desperate, pathetic lies Adam tried to spin from his jail cell. The evidence against him was a mountain. The mechanic's detailed confession, the financial trail revealing his secret, crushing debts, and the digital forensic evidence from his phone and computer. It all painted a clear, damning, and irrefutable picture of his cold-blooded plot. He was denied bail and would face a trial he could not possibly win. He would spend the best years of his life, perhaps all of them, in a small, stark room, a place where his superficial charm and tailored suits would be utterly worthless. My physical recovery was a slow, arduous journey, a daily battle marked by months of grueling physical therapy. Each painful, deliberate step I took in the rehab facility was a step away from the woman I had been, the woman who had been a victim. But my emotional recovery began the very second those handcuffs clicked shut around Adam's wrists. The betrayal had carved a canyon through my soul, but with every new challenge I met, with every bit of strength I regained, I felt the raw edges of that wound beginning to heal, not with bitter scar tissue, but with a resilient, tempered strength I never knew I possessed. I returned to my position as CEO of the Laurel Group, not as the trusting, slightly naive woman who had left that fateful morning, but as a leader forged in fire, focused, decisive, and fully aware of her own power. My father's legacy was safe, no longer a shared dream, but my own singular vision to shape and grow, free from the suffocating shadow of another's greed. Months later, I was standing in my office, looking out at that same breathtaking city skyline. I stood without a wheelchair, without a cane, the dull ache in my leg now just a faint whisper, a reminder of the battle I had won. The late afternoon sun warmed my face. Michael stopped by, a casual visit to check in, a habit he had developed that I cherished. He was no longer just my doctor or my father's old friend. He had become the truest definition of family. "You look good, Sophia," he said, standing beside me at the vast window. "You look peaceful." "I feel it," I replied, and the words were the purest truth I had ever spoken. I turned to him, a genuine smile spreading across my face, a smile that finally reached my eyes. For so long, I believed my marriage was the foundation of my life. I thought all my happiness, my stability, was dependent on him, on us. But it was just a house built on sand, Michael. I gestured out at the sprawling city below. The storm came, and it was bigger and more terrible than I could have ever imagined. It washed everything away, and I'm still standing, because I finally realized the foundation wasn't him. It was never him. It was me. It was my father's unwavering belief in me. It was the strength he knew I had all along. The world, and the man I had loved, had tried to break me, to erase me. But they had failed. I had walked through the darkest corridors of betrayal and emerged into the light, not unscathed, but remade. I was no longer the woman who needed to be reminded of a shared dream. I was the architect of my own. I had taken the pen he tried to use to destroy me, and with it, I had rewritten my entire story. And in this new version, this true version, I was the hero, finally and irrevocably free.